On Baseball Biz on Deck, we have been a strong advocate for women in baseball. A big part of that is telling the stories of women, both historical and what's going on now. We've been looking a lot at what's happening with the USA Women's National Team of baseball and the upcoming tournament at Thunder Bay for the World Cup. As part of that, today we have a very special guest, and that's going to be Veronica Alvarez, coach of the U.S. Women's National Baseball Team. And she's going to be sharing with us a bit about the World Cup coming up in July and August. So let's get started. Welcome to Baseball Biz on Deck. I am Mark Herbert, your host, and with me today, I have Veronica Alvarez. I got to tell you, when it comes to women in baseball, there is talent out there. There are leaders. There's people who inspire. And oh, by the way, Veronica, thank you for being part of that group. Glad to have you on here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
I look at you in a career in baseball. There's been very little of that for women. And as I was growing up, the closest thing, and I probably said this too many times already, is that, when I would see, was it Tatum O'Neal or whatever, and Walter Matthau, and said, that's women in baseball. And
right.
It stopped there. And then I learned, oh my gosh, there's the All-Americans. And they were here. But what the heck happened? I scratched my head. But then I see after actually doing a little homework, I see the emergence of things like, more recently, the Silver Bullets, and of course, the USA Women's National Team, and which you've been a part of, and you're leading now as the manager. So, wow. Now that I've said so much what I think about, what do you have to say as far as, your own personal history? When was that first love of the game come in front of you?
Man, for me, I when I speak about these moments, it's like it was almost like born in me, and it wasn't that I saw one thing and or at least remember that one moment that I saw something, because I was so young when I, was so intrigued by this sport and fell in love with this sport ultimately. So, there's pictures of me with my brother when he started baseball when he was like 3 years old in the stands, right? So I obviously don't remember being 3 years old and remembering one moment, but so that's how I know it was kind of born in me, and I wanted to do it no matter what, and I absolutely loved it. I was completely engaged. There's a picture of me looking at the coach that wasn't my coach. I was just a sister, and all the other players, they're little boys, right? They're 6, 7 years old, and they're just all kind of like looking off into different directions. And I'm just like, yes, tell me more, right? Like, that's how I continue to be within this sport. Later on, I did, come to learn of the Colorado Silver Bullets, like you said, right? Their existence. I was about 12 years old when I saw one of their games on TV. And up until that point, the female athlete wasn't represented on television. They weren't highlighted, especially not a woman in baseball. That almost near didn't exist. So it was just this moment that I will never forget, where I saw them playing. It was women that did this sport that I loved, and that there was some sort of future in it. So that was an amazing moment that maybe just continued the love and continue to cultivate the love that I had for the game and for the possibility of growth within it. And then the movie A League of Their Own was always playing in our house. My dad jokes every time it comes on, and I still watch it to this day when it's on TV or I put it on. My dad jokes, "Oh, good, you've never seen this one before," just because I've seen it so many times. So all those moments of very important moments in history, very important women in history within the game of baseball, I think are so important to highlight their existence. So like you said, if you do some research, you come across those names and those groups of people. So it bums me out when, there's a little girl in the Little League World Series, or another girl playing high level collegiate baseball now that we have, right? Or we have Kelsie Whitmore playing professional baseball, but they don't do the research to discuss what had come before. They want it to be this first of many, hopefully of many, but they want it to be like the the only, right, to make it
Yeah.
more important, when in reality it doesn't need to become more important like that. We could highlight history, we could highlight the past, and still highlight the greatness of this current moment.
Well, you make a very good point there because that's one thing I'm glad to see certain people when they come in at first. But the thing of it is, that person got there for achievement. And if they didn't have that achievement, they're not going to stay there long. For instance, living here in Tampa, I saw when Rachel Balkovec came up and she was going to be managing, the single A team here in town with the Yankees. And I thought, yeah, you know what? But I looked back at her history and I looked at all that she did, whether strength and conditioning and coaching and everything else she did before that. I said, this didn't happen, people. This didn't just a light switch flick and this lady stepped to the field. So let's put a spotlight on her today and then we can forget about her in 2 months.
Right. Yeah, it's really, I think about this pretty often, but we didn't get to these positions. Women in male dominated industries, women in leadership positions didn't get there by accident. Those women are hustlers, right? They're finding a way, they're figuring it out, they're constantly learning, constantly trying to push the envelope on their own personal growth, but also for just gives them better capacity to achieve in the future. And so yeah, any of those women, it didn't happen by accident. It wasn't a token hire. It's women. Token hires don't survive in these worlds, right? So
No.
it was women that really hustled
Yeah.
and did their work, the work that was necessary to be prepared for the opportunity once it came.
Well, and that's it too. I mean, you referenced Kelsie Whitmore earlier. And I mean, guess what, boys and girls? Again, this is somebody who's achieving, she's not a flash in the pan. And
Right.
that's what you have to see. There's great talent. I had the good fortune of seeing a lot of you all, meaning the women's from the USA national team at Vero Beach earlier this year. And man, that was something. You're there with what I guess MLB develops and all these young ladies, who want to play the game. I mean, it's a big part of them. And for goodness sakes, they're there with their heroes. I mean, you guys are sitting there, and here are the women who are doing something with the game and that inspire. And I looked in the eyes and the faces of those young women, and it was like, yes, yes, there's a future here. And when you're working with those young women or young girls, what are some of the words of inspiration that you can share with them?
I mean, there are a lot, right? So that event was special. And just to go back, I'll come back to this one, but just to go back, right? We talk about the first and highlighting the first and things like that, and also talk about history and highlighting history. It's not to discredit anybody in the first, right?
Yep.
I mean, Kelsie getting to where she's gotten, Kelsie is one of the hardest working individuals that you'll ever come, by. So it took a lot of effort from her, and it continues to take that effort. So it's not to discredit them, but the importance of highlighting history and highlighting the women's national team in those conversations, a lot of time when they don't, is to show these young girls that you got to meet at this Trailblazer series that there is a future for them in this sport. We make I keep mentioning the Kelsie story, right? If we make that like this um almost untouchable story, where do these little girls, what do they use to work to, right? There's no like path to that because it's untouchable. It's almost like an impossible story,
Right.
which again it is. So it's not to discredit Whitmore, but it is to show that the importance of highlighting like the existence of the women's national team, the women playing the game, the women coaching in the game, so that these young girls know there's a path for them. So that's one of my favorite parts of the Trailblazer series that you mentioned. At this event, there's about 100 girls that are 12 to 13 years old that solely play baseball. And they play usually on their boys teams, in their, cities or travel ball teams and stuff. And so this event is one of the first times for some of them that they get to play with other girls. And they're just a baseball player. They're not the girl playing
Yeah.
baseball. So it's very important. And on top of that, there are, I don't know the exact number, maybe 14 to 16 coaches, all women that have had a huge impact on the game of baseball. Tamara Holmes was a Colorado Silver Bullet player. We have Monet Davis, that is well known for her success on the Little League World Series. We have myself that works with the A's. We had Alex Hugo that worked with the A's. I mean, like go down the line. We had Kelsie Whitmore. at this event coaching, and women that are on the national team, just game changers, women that are changing the game at all moments, for themselves, but for others as well. So the fact that you asked what messaging can we give these young girls in this event, it's the message that we all live by. We're all growing the game, not necessarily for our own success, but for the future of it. And I think that's an important message for these young girls to see, is like, we've come so far, but there's so much more we could do with it. And so to constantly help each other, it's not an individual sport, right? Constantly help each other, but also set themselves up so that they're helping the future little girls like them as well. So there's this like advocacy and that we create, this like leadership that we create. They see themselves as leaders, they see themselves as game changers, that they can continue to grow physically on their own for the game, but also the impact that they have on the rest of the game for the future of it. That was a long-winded way to say that we promote a lot of leadership with these young girls, a lot of accountability, and understanding what they represent.
Well, let's talk about leadership for a moment, because I mean, you referenced a couple of things, and I wanted to make sure we talked about that. One, you've been recognized, like even the Coach of the Year with the Rod Dedeaux Award. I mean, what you're doing with player development. I want to ask a bit more about that with Oakland, and then globally, what you're doing. You're doing things in the Dominican Republic, and tell me a little bit about some of the globetrotting, if you don't mind, in that.
All right. Well, yeah. So with the Oakland A's, I'm in charge of player development for our Latin American program in the Dominican Republic. So for those that don't know, every organization has a team in the Dominican Republic as an quote unquote affiliate. All our international signees go through that academy. And we're able to sign some players at 16 years old. So they're young. And it's their introduction to professional baseball. So my job is to make sure they're developing the same or at a efficient rate, at maybe a elevated rate on field.
Yeah.
And that they're learning the same things that we're teaching across our other affiliates in the A's organization, so that when they go and they make the jump, when they promote to Arizona, right, to our Arizona Complex League, it's not a huge transition from one step, one place to the other. Every level in baseball is a step, right? It's an elevated pace of game, same game, but it just changes, right? Because we're also narrowing down the playing field as far as level of elite, right? Of mentally and physically elite players. So if I can facilitate a transition that's smoother for them on and off field, that's what I want. We have been successful these last 2 years, at least, in turning some things around, and the level of development that we're seeing out of these young players, which is very promising. And they're happy to be there, and they're happy to learn, and they're happy to fail sometimes, right? Which is a controversial statement, but failure exists in this game at all points. And it's a huge part of developing and growing. So when there's fear of failure, there is no development. So if we can give them the freedom of failure, that's I think a really important part of developing a player, so that they can kind of push the limit on what they're accustomed to doing, and seeing, oh, I could do that, or I could do that a little bit more, or maybe I need to draw back a little bit. But without that freedom of failure, then we don't see development at a high rate. So yeah, so we've been able to do those things down there. So I go to the Dominican pretty often. We just cut the roster down, but we started this season out with about 50 players. Some moved on to Arizona, some were released, and then we have a pretty strong roster right now. So I'm excited to start the season. Today is actually day one of our Dominican Summer League season. So,
oh wow, I can't wait to see more of that, because to me, I want to have you on another time, because I would just love to talk about the cultural change, coming from sometimes poor another community and coming here. I mean, quickly, I'll just mention, thinking of like reading about Pedro Martinez, or
right.
even Big Poppy,
Right.
and they're different stories, but they had to come from one place that was very different. And I know, looking at myself being a Tampa Bay Rays fan, the Cuban players that we have, and Yandy Diaz, my gosh, I love this guy, and Randy Rosarina, but it didn't just happen. And I don't want to go down the road on their stories, but they didn't just walk across the water to get here. And
No.
and you talk about you have to have passion. You have to be willing to put yourself at stake. And I know some of them certainly did. I know Diaz had a difficulty getting across the water to get and be able to play this game. So taking it, leaping from that back to women, because when I look at women in baseball, I look at saying, "Oh, we have one all-star team." That's what it looks like to me. We have one. I know there's not an Olympics. We have, but saying mindset, we have one Olympic team. And to me, the growth and love of baseball is playing others as well. And like you're saying, the joy of winning, but also the learning experience of failure. And that opportunity needs to be there. And forgive me getting on my high horse. And Tamara Holmes knows I do this sometimes. But when I look at that and I say, well, Olympics right now coming up this year in Paris. Hey, guess what's coming up? They're adding a new sport, breakdancing.
Yep.
Come on, people. I'm very happy for them. Don't get me wrong. And
it's great for the break dancers.
Yeah, and another was another Olympic. Yeah, really. And another one I saw that's been there a while is steeplechase. And I'm not talking about the horses. Not talking about the horses. We're talking about the people who are running the track and probably the hurdles, and then have to leap over water. I don't get it, kid. I'm looking at this, and I don't see women's baseball. A curious thing, and I'm going to have to investigate a little bit more. Maybe you know more about it than most people do. When it comes down to looking at the Olympics, my understanding is that each country or each site has the ability to add a sport.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in 2028, it's going to be in LA. I don't know if it's too close to time to make a change there. And in 2032, it's going to be in Brisbane. Do you see a potential for an Olympic team?
For sure. I mean, I think our current team is an Olympic team. As far as talent on the team, the way they come together, their goals, their passion for the game, their drive to be the best player possible. The Our current team is incredible. So I have that goal for the women for the future. That's on my vision board, be an Olympic sport. I think going back to those, you said breakdancing and steeplechasing, like I'm happy for those people, right? That they get to go to these events. And so it's not us versus them. I think the hard part is the fact that people are, and this is our kind of current problem of growth. And I really think that once we can get past this, it would really kind of just like our women's baseball and women in baseball just kind of like, take off. But people are brainwashed to think that softball and baseball are the same sport, that boys play baseball, girls play softball. And so that's what's happening in the Olympics, right? They paired baseball and softball as the equivalent male and female sport. And that's why both of those events are happening in the Olympics. And so it's not to say that we take the place of softball, because there's men's professional fast pitch softball. These men are incredible, right? So it's like, why can't we both exist? Why can't there, without changing anything? You literally wouldn't need a new field. You wouldn't need any other resources, because you already have men's baseball. We play on the same size field. Just let us play there. And for the men's softball side, it's the same thing. So it's not even like you're adding a facility or need a facility. It's the same place. You actually need it when you do, say, men's baseball and women's softball are the same. So, but again, it's not to replace softball. I think we can coexist in the future, and we coexist right now, but we can coexist where we're both successful in the future. And it's not going to take, one's not going to take away from the other. So I think creating that difference in people's minds of knowing that those are two completely different sports, so they appear similar at times. They're not, right? The pitcher throws underhand, one throws overhand. It's a different ball. It's a different bat. It's a different field. There are different rules, right? So it's, to somebody who knows both sports, is very obvious, but to somebody who doesn't, it just is like, it's easier to just box them in as one.
Yeah.
And again, I think that will help our growth stateside and across the world probably, but mostly stateside, because softball is so successful here right now. And I love it, right? I played softball. Softball was great to me, and I loved everyone I met through it and all the experiences I had. But creating that separation in people's minds, only going to continue opening opportunity, only continue to grow the sport in a positive way. So, again, I think we can both coexist.
I like that because you don't make it a softball versus baseball challenge. There's two sports, and they both have good, strong, athletic women achieving something, and
Yes.
they need to be independent of one another, but they don't need to be exclusive of one another. And
Right.
I mean, just go a little bit about your own path, because I've seen, I think the impediment has been for baseball is that, guess what? You reach a certain age as a young girl or woman, and the path of baseball is just taken away. The only other
Yeah.
alternative is with a scholarship, but with another sport. I mean,
Right.
can you give us a little bit of that path for you?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk to it too in its current state. When I was growing up, I fell in love with the game of baseball. I played baseball in Little League and, core leagues and stuff in Miami, and was good. I was one of the better players on the teams. I would make the all-star team, and things like that. And so, when I was like 8 or 9, fast pitch softball started taking off in Miami, and I refused it. I did not want to play that. I wanted to play baseball.
Right.
And so, but the softball world started trying to draw me in because had been playing baseball, for my age at a higher level. I was a better player in the league at the same park. So they were trying to draw me into the softball world. Eventually in 5th grade, I switched to a different school that had a softball team, junior high. So one of my friend's parents convinced me to switch because she said, "Oh, you don't want to be playing baseball at the park and softball at school. Like, it's going to be a switch and you don't want to have to deal with that, like, kind of back and forth." And so eventually I gave in and I played softball. But a lot of the stories for the girls that I coach, or the women that I've played with and coach, is that they're kind of pushed out of baseball.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to play at the next level. They have to fight it. They have to seek out the opportunities. One of our legends on the women's national team, and now one of my assistant coach on staff, her story was that she wrote letters to different high schools in her area just asking for a fair opportunity, and whoever was going to give it to her, that's where she was going to go try out. And so that's how she, was able to play high school baseball. She sought out the opportunity, or somebody that was at least going to give her a fair look. So a lot of these women fight to play this game. And it has gotten better in the sense that these MLB camps have really kind of bridged a gap that didn't exist before. Like you mentioned, instead of even high school, at like 13 years old, if they were pushed out of baseball, they wouldn't come back.
Yeah.
We would get them at the women's national team tryout at 16 years old, and most 16-year-olds don't make that. They're competing against mid 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds that have competed in collegiate sports, that understand their bodies differently. And so they wouldn't make the team at 16, and then we would never see them again. And it was such a shame because there was good talent there. They weren't ready yet. And so that's a big part of my approach with our young players is knowing that, and finding ways to encourage them to continue to play. Me, from a mental aspect, because I don't provide physical opportunities. I don't have a travel team. I don't have a team that I take to tournaments or anything like that. So I try to provide it in a mental aspect of, like, showing them that they're developing at these events that they go to, any training camp that USA Baseball puts on, all the MLB develops events, and showing them that there is a place for them in the future if they continue on this path. And so we've seen a lot of progress there. We've seen more girls playing through high school. We now have more girls playing in college. So I think it's just going back to that, having opportunities for them to continue to develop in the game of baseball is really important for our growth as a sport and for their growth and achieving their goals. Because a lot of them do want to play collegiate baseball, but softball's an option. And that's always in the conversation. Nobody wants to hear it. And I tell people not to tell the players that, because every person, mostly men, that come across a girl that plays baseball, like in little league or a travel team or a high school, they'll message me and be like, "What do you think I should tell her? I think she should switch to softball." I'm like, do not tell her to switch to softball. I assure you that this girl, every day of her life, has been told that softball is an option. She knows softball is an option. She knows it. She's very fully aware of it. So support her in her baseball dream. Just like boys, she might fail, she might succeed, right? But if she wants to play baseball, support her in that. She knows 100% assured of it that softball is an option. At our development events, right, where the conversation seems more like mentor to player, like, hey, I've been in your shoes, right? Or I see where you're at. I'm in the same fight in a different, on a different railroad, but we're fighting the same fight kind of thing. We might have the conversation of, hey, maybe you should switch to softball for this opportunity, right? We may present it as an option again, but at a different conversation, because now it's like I see where you're at physically, I see your level, I've seen both sides. What are your goals? If your goals are like I'm in line with their goals, but if softball's like kind of there and they want to go to a D1 and they want to do certain things, it's like maybe that's the route you want to take. Right. But the conversation is different than like a random coach suggesting softball at every point of their path.
Yeah.
I have a player on the women's national team that she had an opportunity to play college baseball and was injured, and then COVID happened. And so I had presented her with, hey, or like, hey, have you thought about going? And she was in the rat race. She was working, trying to pay her way through school. And this is one of the most athletic women that I've seen as far as level of athleticism. Okay. And so I approached her. I was like, hey, have you considered softball? I mean, I know that you're diehard baseball and I would love for you to play baseball, but if you're like struggling right now, struggling to stay afloat, like you could go to school for free, And so she's like, oh, she kind of, entertained the idea and then came back to me and says, you know what, I'm not ready. And that was fine. And then a year later, she's like, I'm ready now. So we got her in a university and she goes to school for free, right? And she's competing. And I always thought she deserved to be a Division I athlete, whatever that sport was, right? So anyway, those conversations do come up often and the paths are different for everyone. But the more opportunities we can create with them, we can kind of postpone the moment that they feel like they're pushed out of it.
Well, I mean, I like the idea that
Talk a lot.
hey, well, you know what, you break me up some because I'll go on forever. But seriously, I know the thing of it is options, and what's going to be best for that person. But you're not saying, okay, you reach this age. I'm sorry, I hope you enjoyed baseball, but it's now time for you to play softball. And that's really your only option. I mean, I loved watching some of the collegiate softball in the past years, watching Oklahoma do all that they did is like, oh my gosh. But again, ideally in my mind, I would be seeing women's baseball as well. And, at an NCAA level. That's not here yet. I don't know when it's going to be. I look back historically to, early 1900s, and you had women's collegiate teams. It was Rasmussen. I can't remember. One of the universities, it was a women's university. And it's one where they wore skirts all the way down to their ankles and they had to run and, catch. One of the ladies took a fall and then somebody said, oh, that's it. I'm sorry. This game is not for women. We cannot allow that. We're taking the whole team thing away. And that just, it's disturbing. I think that mindset still somewhat there.
It's crazy how it still exists. So it almost exists more for the women in the male spaces. Like they're like so concerned the ball's gonna hit us or something. And I'm like, first off, I've been coaching a long time. I haven't gotten hit by a ball. Okay. So, but second, if a ball hits me, I can assure you I'm not gonna react.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be like, well, that hurt, but I'm not going to do anything about it. And I'm not going to cry about it. I'm not going to sue anybody. I'm not going to just like crumble, right? Like, again, going back to that, women that get to these places aren't going to just like, I don't know. I think they think we're so like a little flower petal that is, women are the most resilient people in the world. They have babies. I mean, like, come on.
There you go.
So it's crazy. And like, I mean, the other day in the Dominican, we had a female umpire for the first time I've seen in the Dominican. And the boys, they have me as a voice and a leader and a presence and stuff. So they're really good. We're really good, right? As far as like women and stuff like that. But to them, it's still new. And the implication was like, oh my God, what if the ball hits her? And I was like, that lady's probably the toughest person out here right now. Like she's not going to react if the ball hits her. It's not a big deal, So yeah, there's this like idea of, that we're so delicate.
You're so delicate. You're such a nice little flower. in the jeez. Well, okay, but here I am. I'm talking to a catcher who's got a ball thrown to him all the time. I mean, that's the role you had. And if you can see that, if a person sits down and looks, okay, what's Veronica been doing lately? Oh, firefighter. Did I forget to mention that?
Oh yeah, I'm a
Jeez, when you
firefighter.
running into freaking buildings that are on fire, and you got to be an athlete. I mean, you're looking at women athletes, and for them to not only aspire to these roles, for them to get there with all the impediments that they've had, that's a super athlete. And I guess that's part of what I'm thinking about too. With I'm going to jump to Thunder Bay coming up with the USA Women's National Team. My gosh, I didn't realize at first that you're looking at some young women as early as what 16 years of age at being
Yes.
on that team. But they have to stand out. They have to have a passion. They have to have a physicality to do that. And daggone, Veronica, I can't imagine if you only have one team for all these women to come to meet with the elite. This goes back to what I was trying to say earlier. You look at MLB, you've got 30 teams, and God knows you got 4 or 5 levels of minor league teams and farm system. But for women, guess what? The epitome, or I should say the pinnacle, is coming and getting on the USA women's baseball team.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
I mean, everything you've done and what they can aspire to. By the way, when is the Thunder Bay coming up?
It comes out, the team gets together July 16th. We'll do a tryout. We have 40 invites in Minnesota. And the first couple days are a tryout to go from 40 to 20. And then we'll stay there with the top 20 and train for, I think maybe 1 or 2 days before we head up to Canada. We'll train some days and then our event starts. Wow, I should know the exact date to tell you this. Our
I know it's in
events,
August.
it's like for me, it's like the moment we get there, that's when it starts. So
Yep.
July 16th in my mind, but our games actually start July 28th and then go through that first weekend in August. But yeah, we're a mix of ages. The MLB camps have really helped kind of create a bank of young players to kind of help them develop and give them the same messaging. So I'm now the MLB baseball ambassador for girls baseball. And so it just is a title to kind of what I was doing before of I lead the events on field. And so these players have a continuous message, a consistent message across the board from when they're 13 years old to when they're at the EDI event, which is the top 60 high school age girls, and then the top 30 high school age girls at the Breakthrough Series. And so that message obviously gets a little bit more complex, let's say, but its foundation and that what we teach and preach as we do as coaches is consistent across the board. So now when they enter the women's national team, sure, they might be 16, 17, 18 years old, but they've been performing under those same parameters for the last couple years at those events. And so then it's a easier, smoother transition into the women's national team. So just like the boys side, right? I kind of used a lot of what I learned on the women's side and the girls side, and how I approach the academy and the DR, and vice versa. I learned a lot from that academy for the women's event. But these young players that you might see on our roster or might see at our tryout are high level for their age, and they really fit in. You probably couldn't tell the 17-year-old away from the 30-year-old at times, which is what we want. We want our decision on July 21st, I think, our cuts to be the hardest decision for us ever. Right? We don't want it to be a simple, obvious choice at every position. We want everyone to feel challenged. We want our decision to be hard. And so that's where we're getting to right now. I think in years past, the level hadn't risen as like joint, as a collective. And so there were a lot of repeat national team members. And I think that'll always be the case because those women, again, like I said before, understand their bodies, have played at a high level in another place. They understand what it takes to try out on the women's national team, play on the national team, and compete at an international level. But we were seeing less qualified options, I would say, years past. And now we've gotten to a point where everyone's competing for a spot. And it's really fun to see. It's stressful and it's really hard to have those hard conversations at the end. and break some bad news. But for the sport and for the team, at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to win as a team and as a nation. So that's what matters. That's what we want.
Well, you've been living that. I know I was looking at, his name was Jennifer Ring's book. There's a chapter on you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but or maybe I saw it somewhere else with you, that you're talking about impediments and maybe how people would either treat a young person, a young woman, but you were like, I thrive on that. Give me a challenge. Give me a reason to, come back and do that. And that fire, and I've said this before. Sometimes I think I see more tenacity in a woman's sport because maybe there's a quote need to prove themselves unquote that pushes them maybe even further than whatever a male counterpart might be. But my gosh, you have my respect. I mean, the everything from MLB ambassador to being out there with those young ladies at the different events and the training with MLB develops. What you're doing with Oakland, my gosh, you wear many hats, and but I respect you for that, and I respect all that the women are doing. I can't wait to see Thunder Bay.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. We've been building this team since 2019 is when I became the manager of the team. In 2018 was the last time we played a World Cup, and we were not happy with our end result. And our world ranking dropped with the same team from 2018. In 2019, we played a Pan American qualifier, and those same teams that we lost to or were neck and neck with, we absolutely destroyed. Destroyed is too aggressive of a word, but that's not to. I'm not trying to hate on the other teams. That was to show our growth from one year to the next, and since 2019, these women have only gotten better. And like I was saying before, the younger group of players are female prospects in a sense have only upped their level as well, because when the women up their level, guess what, the young ones also have to do the same. So to watch their growth when they come together, it's really fun to see a 16-year-old at 1 week at the MLB Breakthrough Series, and then the next week she comes out to the women's national team tryout, and maybe the first day she's figuring it out, and then the change in work ethic and the change in drive changes from one day to the next. So it's really cool to see that together. But we've been building this team since 2019, including I've been learning, I've been growing, I've been in these incredible spaces with professional baseball around some incredible people. So not only have I been improving my level of coaching knowledge and everything like that, they've been pushing the same on field. And I've been able to, have some really incredible coaches come out to our training camps. And so they've gotten advice and guidance from really incredible coaches through these last 5 years. So we're very excited to showcase all that we've done since that time and show that we deserve a gold medal, that we are competing for one. We don't want anything less. But we're also elevating the standard of the game because we do want to be an Olympic sport. And we want everyone to rise with us. We don't want to bring anybody down, but we want to set the tone as far as what should be expected across the board from every country, so that when we do get the opportunity to play in the Olympics, it's entertaining and it's something that continues to be a sport in the Olympics forevermore.
Oh, I love that. That absolutely. I mean, to me, I wouldn't say it's an ultimate goal, but it's certainly a high level goal that should happen with women's baseball. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the women that are doing it. So let me ask you now, here we are. It's June the 3rd, and you're going to be pulling all this together in short order. My gosh, what do you do preparation wise before you start in July?
Well, first off, it was setting the invites for the tryout. So which we got those out. And it's hard. We have a lot of dedicated women that have been to our development camps, a lot of young players, like I said, that I don't want to dismiss or feel like they're not good enough. It's just that out of the options, maybe they're not ready yet, right? So there's this whole kind of mindful approach to invites and things like that, and obviously with the goal being winning. So we need the best 40 out there not only for future success of the team, but for current success in order to challenge our players, our starters in the top 20. So the top 40 needs to be as strong as possible so that in practice, in tryouts, we're competing against each other and elevating our game as a whole. Not just, I see it as that. I see it as a development event for individual, for team, but also it's still a tryout. So that's really important. We've selected that. Coaching staff has been selected. Our staff has been consistent since 2019. The core of the staff has been consistent, and then we added Malika Underwood last year, which was a longtime player on the women's national team. And so our staff is, again, consistency with the women's national team is really important because the fact that we do have those repeat players. And it's different from a typical USA Baseball national team on the boys' side because they change out players every year.
Right.
So this sense of consistency isn't so much necessary. And when I say consistency, it doesn't mean we're not growing and learning, right? Because our mindset, our body are consistently the same, but we're constantly upping our game as well. So there's that balance of we're not just teaching the same thing that we taught in 2018 necessarily. We've changed our approach and things like that and the way we'd explain things. So, but yeah, I think that's really been beneficial to the women. So kind of just setting that up. And then it really starts when we get there. And practice planning will come at some point. I work with our team director from USA Baseball on, layout of the days that we're there. And then I'll dive in deeper and do a practice plan for every day. And then from there we get going. But the moment we boots on the ground, we get going.
All right. Well, Veronica, I can't thank you enough for being on the show today and sharing with us a lot of what's going on with women's baseball and certainly with the, started to say Olympic team, USA women's national team.
The more we say, the more chance it is that it gets out into the universe and it happens. But another part of the prep, which I have to mention because this is to the credit of the women.
Please do.
Because we get a few little time together, right? We're getting together July 16th and we're playing July 27th. They have to come in ready, not ready to make the team, ready to compete at the end of July. And so the work that has to be done by them comes on their own.
Right.
Some of the ones that maybe we have a 17-year-old now, we have a couple girls and women in college. But other than that, like those might have access to gyms and strength programs and they've been practicing day to day, right? But the ones outside of that world have to seek out the information, seek out coaches to help them day to day, and then also have to push themselves physically in the gym and things like that to be ready in July. So these women are incredible. I speak to it on the girls' side. And at these events, any little girl you see in baseball, you're going to find a resilient girl who has worked through some adversity, and that's the same for the women that are pushing the envelope, have some incredible drive and passion for just being the best that they can be in pretty much anything, right? It's displayed on field for us, but they're incredible outside the field as well.
Well, there's a lot to look forward to. I like what you're saying too, is being ready to step up to the plate when the boots are on the ground and where the opportunities may be for some of these young women and where there's still some challenges as far as those opportunities. But I'm going to continue to be an advocate for women's baseball because, wow, wouldn't you? No, but seriously, there's so much in the game. And to me, seeing things like the Trailblazer series and the other ones that are going on, and to me, that's a good way of seeing the future starting to build. It's the building blocks you and the others are making sure that not only the people you're with, but the opportunities for those youngsters that are coming up in the game as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right. That's Veronica Alvarez, the coach of the United States All-American. Well, All-American. I'm all over the place with this. U.S. National Women's Baseball Team. It's going to be going up to Thunder Bay. We're talking about the team that's been won the Pan Am and back in 2015 and has proven himself time and again since then. So, world, wake up. We're looking forward to it, Veronica. And again, thanks again for being on Baseball Biz on Deck.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to it too.
I just want to remind everybody, Veronica Alvarez, who's the coach of the U.S. Women's National Baseball Team, will be heading up that team at the World Cup in Thunder Bay. And that's going to be coming up in the last part of July and the first part of August. We'll put more in the show notes for that. I want to thank you all again for joining us here today on Baseball Biz on Deck. And remember, you can find us here. You can find us on baseballbizondeck.com,
iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Radio. We're everywhere. So thanks again, and we look forward to talking with you again real soon.
Special thanks to X-Take RUX for the music rocking forward.